I'd like to welcome you all to Artery Videocast. And today I have the pleasure of speaking to one of the most interesting personalities from the Indianart fraternity, Lavesh Jagasia, someone who, as you'll understand over the next 1 hour, has done anything but walk down the beaten path in this domain. Lavesh, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, Arvind.
Okay, so Lavesh, over the past 25 years, you've contributed to this ecosystem in very many ways. But if we look at the very outset, you started off as a collector. This was about 25 odd years back?
That's correct, yes. I was basically pretty much, visiting all these exhibitions and stuff like that. So, you can say it now in hindsight that yes, I started off as a collector, but I wouldn't have thought of myself as a collector in those days. It was more of an enthusiast, art aficionado. I would visit exhibitions with an idea to kind of see and understand what's going on. What's the scene like? I had the opportunity to meet all these artists, the great artists who have passed on since. So yes, in hindsight, you can say that I started off as a collector, but I would think that in those days, I would have thought of myself as an enthusiast or an aficionado, not spending too much money, but looking at art, but simultaneously also acquiring a few pieces, whatever I would have thought I would want to do.
So, Lavesh, what prompted your entry into this direction? You said that you visited all these exhibitions and shows. Was it because there was someone in the family who was handholding you, or someone whose footsteps you were following upon? I mean, what pushed you in this direction?
So no, nobody in the family was, involved in art or had any exposure to fine art. I mean, it was something that pretty much I got involved in on my own. It happened absolutely, by chance. I was doing up a few of, my properties to, make them into serviced apartments, kind of like furnishing them completely. And, one of the requirements for that was art. And I would actually go around to exhibitions, start looking at things. I was involved in collecting various things, including pens, watches, shawls, carpets, various things. So, this collector's bug was always there. And, art was something that also happened alongside that. And then whatever pieces I would buy at that time, I would, use these apartments as, places to hang them up, and it would kind of like stay there. Of course, they were not as pricey as what they are today. Otherwise, probably I would have had second thoughts about hanging them there.
Lavesh, do you remember what the first work of art was, the one that you purchased?
So, I would say it seems like a stroke of luck or, by chance, or I don't know. I mean, what can you call it? Maybe I was just lucky. I bought a paperwork of FN Souza, and it was all of 9,000 rupees. And that was the first work I bought today. And, even today, I mean, amongst all the, established artists, he's one of the artists who kind of holds his own. So I would have thought that I started off well.
Right. And if you could just give me a little insight into, those early days when you were collecting, did you read books? Did you speak to, people who then showed you the light? How did you go about that process as a young early collector?
So I think it was pretty much interactive. We were lucky in those days because, all the artists were approachable. So, if you went to Jhangi to see a show, or if you went to a gallery to see a show, I mean, the artists would pretty much be there. So, most of the modernists also who today would have passed on, they would be available, and you could have a cup of tea with them, have a chat while sitting in the gallery and kind of engage with them. So I would say my experience and interactions would have been actually much more enriching because they were first-hand by meeting the artists as opposed to reading only books, because in those days the number of books that we would have had on Indian artists and overall Indian art were much more limited than what we have today. I think in the last 10-15 years there are a lot of publications that have come and become available, which was not the case at that time. There were a few books which you would find, but not very much. So I would say it was mostly practical, interactions with these artists that helped me understand and get more ingrained into the art collecting sphere.
So I think, Lavesh, that is a very important point you make. If you are to learn from the master himself, that truly is unparalleled. Something that is often asked of us. We have an advisory practice as well. Something that's often asked is, how do you start? How do you take those first steps? So I think the route that you had, that showed you the light, so to speak, I think that would always remain unchallenged and unparalleled. Because if you're learning from the creator himself or herself, what better?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with that, and that actually also has put me in a situation where I'm uniquely placed, where I would say that I had the experience to interact with these artists, to be able to speak with them, to be able to understand their studio practice, their thought processes, with whatever time I could learn to learn from them or spend with them. The thing was, I think probably at that point in time, they were kind of pretty much intrigued with the situation. Who's this young boy who's coming and asking us so many questions and stuff like that? So I think they were taken in by that, and they were more than happy to engage with me. And then they would kind of like ask me things, what I do, and what my interests are and everything like that. They would spend time, and it was pretty much long days, because you would sit in the gallery throughout the day, or you would have time. So you could have slots where you could actually be interacting with these artists without being disturbed. So that was a very good experience, I would say, which made me learn a lot about them. That relationship actually went to the next level when I started doing my serigraphs with them. So I started doing limited edition serigraphs with these artists, and that relationship that I had built up with them, of a collector, of a young person who's interested in their art, that helped me to take it to the next level, because I approached them with this project that I had in mind of doing limited edition prints of the works, and they were very happy to collaborate and participate in that. That experience of actually doing those serigraphs also gave me a lot of exposure to their studio practice, because I spent a lot of time in their studios. And then when we used to discuss their artworks, their imagery, as to which artworks are to be used, and which images we use to do the portfolio that we are looking at, what works they think are strong, what should be included, and then we build up their image from starting from almost like right from the substrate, which is paper. We build up the image to the serigraph. So I'm learning about how they think about their color palette, how they're thinking about their strokes, how it should kind of result, and what should be the end interaction that the collector or the viewer should have. So that experience has been absolutely unparalleled. I think that is what is I would say given me a keen eye to be able to understand their works in today's day and age, which is a rare thing to have, I would say.
Absolutely. And you talk of the importance of being able to have the privilege of time, this much around these masters. Lavesh, before we go further, I'd like you to tell us a little about what a serigraph is. Could you explain to someone who's never heard the term before what a serigraph entails?
So, serigraph is, simply put, is a screen print. The word serigraph is coined to use screen prints which are used for artworks. And it's made pretty much with the same screen printing process that you would do any kind of commercial screen printing. But when you use it for artistic purposes, then we use a terminology of serigraph to differentiate it from commercial screen printing.
Right.
Pretty much the process is planographic, where you have a screen, and then you have ink which is put on that, and the ink is pushed through the screen onto a substrate, which could be paper, or it could be any other substrate that an artist would like to use. And you build up the image by having one color and the second and the third, and so on and so forth. So you have multiple colors depending upon how the artist is imagine their work to be. And at the end, you have a result of an image which comes through with using the multiple colors. And pretty much the visual engagement with a serigraph, I would say, would be of a grade which is very close to a painting, because similarly how you would apply paints on a canvas, you would apply ink on a substrate which is a screen print. And hence you have the quality of the color and the engagement, which is similar to an artwork which you see like a painting.
So just to understand the process a little better, the original painting that is referred to, does that come and fall in the hands of the dealer? I mean, the person representing the serigraphs, or does that go back to the artist studio?
No, so there are various ways. So initially when an artist would have done an artist's print, which is like he would imagine a serigraph to be something where you would actually cut the design or the image that you would want into a screen and then push the ink out of that particular screen, which was the earlier traditional way of doing it, right? Like you have traditional lithography, which is done on limestone block. That's a traditional way of doing it, right? As times progressed and technology has advanced, there's been different ways to approach the screen. The screen gets exposed either by a photo process or various kind of technological advancements have allowed you to do that. So now the serigraph would be built up. It would be through one of these methods, and even the quality of the inks and everything that you have, you get various kinds which allow you to do more complex images. And hence the build-up of the image is very close to the original artwork. But pretty much like where an artist would use maybe a palette knife or a brush to kind of apply paint on the canvas, here you're using a squeegee, which basically is nothing else but device to push the ink through the screen onto the substrate. So that's how you build up the image, basically. Earlier, the artists used, maybe an apprentice or did it themselves if they were printmakers. But if they were not printmakers and if they had, their main medium, which would be painting, they would use an apprentice to, do it, or approach, publishers to, come out with their editions. And these would be done under their supervision. So which would, be endorsed by them and then numbered, title, and signed by them.
Right. So the Serigraph Studio was your first professional adventure, so to speak, in the Indianart domain. Correct, Lavesh?
That's right. And that itself was also, if you can, call it like, if I was to give it like a commercial term, a B2B venture, because I was actually, collaborated with the artists. I was representing them to the galleries and places wherever we would have their exhibitions. Right. So we are a publishing house, so art publishing house. We collaborated with these artists. We released and distributed their limited edition prints, and they were sold through their galleries or any other, art business people or art entrepreneurs, whoever acquired them.
Right. And at no point, Lavesh, did you think about opening a direct-to-market agency at this point? Something that would interact directly with an end buyer?
So, actually being in the sales area was something that I was always somewhere a bit cautious about, because I felt that I'm not, very sales oriented person. So I thought that better to have somebody else to kind of like, take care of that domain. And another reason for that also was that these artists who I was working with, they already had established galleries and relationships with them, which were already established. So we did not want to enter into that space. What we wanted to do was create something and present one more, you can say, overview of the work that we wanted to give to the galleries to be able to sell. So essentially, the first right of refusal was with the gallery that was already working with them. So, if they were selling their paintings, now they had their serigraphs to sell also. So we didn't want to cross that line and kind of get into that space as well. So it never occurred to me. So it was like a combination of these two things, because of which we never got into that, direct sales area.
So, Lavesh, the point that you make here is a very important one, of there always being opportunities that exist in every ecosystem. If one were to sort of lean back and just consider the way things were rolling in the late 1990s, this would have been, 98, 99 that you set up the Serigraph Studio?
That's right. It was towards the end of the 90s, and then, we continued to do this till about mid-2000s.
Right. So, I think the point that you make here is very important. My personal belief is in any scenario, in any ecosystem that even seems entirely dense and rich and populated, there's always an avenue to pursue where you can shake things up if you firmly believe in what you're creating. Serigraphs at the outset may not have been the first thing to come to one's mind. How did you chance upon the idea of creating a sort of serigraph empire, as it were? Lavesh, where did that idea come from?
So, traveling abroad, whenever I would go to maybe any museums, you see them in museum shops, you see them in some other galleries, and you start thinking that, okay, now, these artists are there and, their works are available. We have the opportunity to work with them. What's going to happen, a few years down the line?
Right.
And since there was no art publisher of like a formal stature that existed, there were like certain, outfits that operated as printers, which artists would use to print their artworks for sure. I mean, screen printing, outfits were there, but nobody was like operating as an art publisher who would have collaborated with multiple artists and done that. So that concept had not yet come to India, but it was there very much, rampant in the West, and it was like a model which was accepted. So, looking at that, I thought, yes, this is a space that can be looked at, and it would be something which would hold in good stead, because the works of the modernists that I actually engaged with or collaborated with, eventually this kind of portfolio would archive their works in a small way, so it becomes something which becomes collectible from a point of view that you get to see these artists' works from a certain period till now. And this is something which eventually will be in collectors' homes. We don't have that moving museum shows and all happening so often where you get to see these artists' work. So this would actually at least give you a window into the artist's body of work even in a small way.
Sure. So, Lavesh, actually, what you again mentioned here is of great value. You were able to work with, as I recall, the veritable list of pretty much every master I can think of, and what you created with each release was a portfolio which covered a very interesting body of the artist practice that, if put together as a suite, would be very sort of interestingly telling of that artist's practice. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the artists you worked with? Maybe give us some insight into some of these interesting stories from back in the day.
Sure. So yes, that was one of the main reasons to create a large body of works, because you wanted to give a window from a certain period of their works and also coming up to the present. So we would sit with the artists and decide that we want to do a portfolio of so many works, and we would pick a certain number from each period and try and kind of include them into the portfolio that were to be released. This would be like a mutual dialogue between, or it was a dialogue, a mutual discussion between the artist and myself, and we would come across with various images that they have placed, and we decide amongst them that which ones are to be used, and it was a good exercise. Even that was a good insight into their thought process as to what they thought were strong works, and what they thought were going to appeal to the general audience and stuff like that. So all those discussions, they actually leave you with they leave you enriched, because you also understand how the artist is thinking.
Of course. Did you find support from all the artists across the board, or was there hesitation or skepticism or general concern from any of the artists you engaged with back then?
No, so to be perfectly honest, I mean, I would say most of the artists, whoever I would have approached, they would have been more than happy to, they were more than happy to participate. So I can say I was fortunate that way, that there was no reason for resistance, simply because, like I said, the time when I was doing it, it could not be perceived to be a purely commercial venture. Because see, in those days, even the primary market was not what it is today. So, there were works of these artists which were available. So I remember, like, when I used to talk to these artists and I used to tell them that I'm planning to do this, I once remember, like, a very interesting conversation which I had with, Ram Kumar. And, he was quite fond of me. He told me that, he said, Lavesh, are you sure that, you want to do this? I said, why do you say that? He said, because, I've done an exhibition with Hussain and Gaitonde. We were selling our prints for 20 rupees and not even one sold in that whole exhibition in Jangir. So he said, I'm just like kind of looking out for you that, the investment that you're going to do in all this should be safe. I said, no problem, I'll go on with that, and, we'll see what happens. So, that actually is something that they understood that it cannot be purely commercial, because it's not something that you make today and you're going to sell tomorrow.
Sure.
So if that is not the case, they also understand that someone is willing to commit themselves to the vision and the long-term, plan. And I think that kind of probably, allowed them to think, positively towards the, proposal.
Right, fantastic. So Lavesh, this in many ways was getting two birds with one stone, right? You were able to have the privilege of time with these artists with whom you could engage, for days at end.
Right.
And it was also a commercial pursuit that then allowed you to understand some of the, the machinations of this business. Is that right?
Yes. At that time, to be very honest, I did not apply my mind to the, end mathematics, or, what would be the, outcome or the result of the business plan, or the, entire kind of like end result of, the sales or anything like that, because one didn't know how long it's going to take you to sell, what's going to happen. It was just that since these were the artists whose works I was collecting, I thought that, okay, this is also one way of me kind of getting involved in it. And I'm actually, instead of collecting paintings, I'm collecting serigraphs. So it could also be one way to look at it. Worst case scenario, it won't sell today. And over a period of time, maybe, we'll have people realize that these really are something which they can kind of cherish and, have. And it would be something which would probably, sell over a period of time. Maybe a long time, but it will.
And give us a sense of how the Serigraph portfolios were mounted. You had them all in a standard set of numbers, and they all had the same editions. Could you give us a sense of that and what they were priced at when they were originally released?
So, the edition is something that we maintain. The edition size we maintained standard across all the artists, which was 125. Okay. And that was the number that we arrived at to make it economically viable, at the same time not making the edition size too large.
Right.
And the number of works that we actually did with every artist varied. With some we did more, with some we did less. The reason was not that we did more with one artist because of any particular reason and less with any one artist for any particular reason. It's just the I would say the geographical limitations, sometimes timing limitations. There are so many things, because you're based in one place, you're traveling, you need to take all this back and forth for approvals, and then get them to sign it, and there's too much of logistics involved, and taking the whole edition, taking it back and forth, and even multiple times to get them to kind of like approve every color. It's like too much of a logistical nightmare, so to speak. So that would have been one of the reasons. But our starting price for the serigraphs, we started them as low as, I think, about 8 to 10,000 rupees for per serigraph for a smaller size, which is like a full imperial or a full sheet size, and then going up to maybe double of that for a larger size or what. So that was when we just started off, and we've done even smaller works than that, which were sold even for much less than that. Today, of course, as the edition sells out, the prices have changed completely.
Right.
And which, now that you talk about pricing, it reminds me of another incident with our one of our most popular artists, MF Hussain. I was actually almost working with him to do edition of his works, which eventually kind of like go forward. We didn't land up doing it, but I remember in that conversation he asked me the same thing as to how much are you selling these works for. So I told him these figures, 10-12,000. He was amazed. He's saying, like, is this a business or social service that you're doing? He said, you have to look at pricing them in lakhs, and at that time I could not even dream to think that these would be sold at like those kind of prices, but we are way ahead of that today. So I would say that that gives you an insight into what he believed is possible, and his vision for the entire, Indian art market as a whole. And I think his contribution single-handedly to, make the price, to make the, art world as robust as what it is for the overall Indian art sphere is, unparalleled.
Yeah, Lavesh, if one were to summarize, the gentleman in one word, it would be truly a visionary. Someone who had conviction that seemed to come from no place at all. It was conviction in his own craft, but also that of fraternity and the domain at large. He just knew that we were headed in a certain direction, even when nobody else could see that. So it is absolutely remarkable, and I think his contribution to where we are today as a whole is immense, probably unparalleled. And this little story that you share with us, I think that summarizes his conviction.
I mean that. Yeah, he was thinking of things what we didn't even know would happen or when it would happen, but he already knew that, this is the direction that we have to take at least, and you have to at least start walking on that path,
Really. So this was prophetic, because now serigraphs from those original suite, that you refer to at being between 8,000 and 12,000 rupees, they'll comfortably be selling for a couple of lakhs, correct?
So at least a lakh and upwards basically. So which would be, something that, like I said, at that point in time, I would have not thought about it also. So you see there's you can see 3 different stages where Kumar spoke about 20 rupees, I spoke about 10,000 rupees, and, Hussain spoke about 1 lakh, and now we are in the lakhs. It's like that.
Clearly. So your serigraphs have, much like Hussain Saab's horses, charged along in the right direction.
So, I think, if you look at it from a larger perspective, we are a large country. We have a, growing population of people who are, improving their lifestyle overall, their understanding, their aesthetics, the homes that they're making, everything is getting better. So this would be your first foray into that, collecting sphere, and you would start engaging with that. So you would start with, new artists, who are there, and, younger artists. And, when you also understand a little bit more about the history of Indian art, you might want to engage with some of the modernists, and this would be one way to engage. So, it's a safe way. It's an inexpensive way, and, it's like, comfortable, way to enter into their world.
Sure. No, it makes complete sense. And I think the logic that you just qualified, this is something that a number of collectors, or at least early stage collectors, would have also used in order to dip their toe into the pool rather than taking a dive straight off. I think is sensible. Rather than diving into something that you don't fully understand, it's important for you to comprehend what you're dealing with before putting yourself wholeheartedly to it. And serigraphs make for a very fascinating first step in that direction. So I'm certain, Lavesh, what you experienced during those initial couple of years would have been fascinating. You would have also seen a number of collectors who probably were birthed under the Serigraph Studios brand, who went on to accomplish far greater things over the following years.
Yeah, absolutely. That would have been a way that they would have kind of dipped their feet, and so to speak, in the pool of the art world, and kind of went on from there to buy very expensive works of art in hundreds of thousands of dollars eventually. Yeah, and fortunately, the experience and the relationship that they would have had, being with us, helped me when I launched, Artiana, our auction house, based out of Dubai. Once I moved to Dubai, that relationship continued with them, and I was able to bring them on board, and they were more than happy to, participate and kind of support our new venture as well.
Right. So the second adventure comes somewhere along the mid 2000s, where you move out of the country. This was what, 2005 or 6 when you moved out to Dubai, and you continued with the Serigraph studio during this phase.
So 2006 is when I moved out of Bombay and moved to Dubai, and ever since that we've been based here. And for the initial few years, you're right, we continued with the program of, the limited edition prints, both in India and overseas as well. In fact, we worked with few artists, from here as well, and came out with limited edition prints of their works as well. So some international artists also we worked with when we moved here. But essentially, like I explained earlier, one of the reasons was to have an archive of the works of the modernists. So once I would have actually worked with pretty much most of them, the next step was either you go back and revisit them and do another portfolio, or you start working with the contemporary artists. And both of those things did not really make sense, because if you start making more prints of the same artist, then, if I can use the word or the phrase I said, becomes limited from unlimited. That means you can keep making any number, and then you just keep taking images and kind of creating pictures, and that's not really going to kind of work out in the long run. And doing prints of contemporary artists, whilst it's a good thing, their works were in any case available at prices which were affordable for people to buy. So the reason to do the prints is it is not as strong a case as doing it for the modern. So that is why I was at a point where I had to think that, okay, so now what do I do? But now these things interested me, and I said, okay, I did some introspection. I had acquired this knowledge and the understanding of these modernist works, and I said, how do I institutionalize this knowledge? How do I share it with other people? And at that time, I felt that, whilst I was here, a lot of people would ask me, Lavesh, what do you think of this work? Can you recommend me, good quality work of an artist, or good subject of the artist? And I felt that, by then my eye was trained to a level where I could actually, help people and advise them. And again, because of my, temperament of not being comfortable with direct sales or, being in the dealing segment, I said, now how do I find something which I can use this knowledge, but at the same time not be in a very direct selling kind of space. And that's when this idea of having the auction platform came up, where I said that I could actually be the expert who would curate the catalog. I would be able to put together something which I would have thought that people would have wanted and liked, and brought that to the forefront without doing any hard selling or putting it onto people and kind of trying to be a salesperson, so to speak. So I think that kind of suited my temperament and the skill level and the knowledge that I had. That's how Artiana was born.
Right. So Artiana was born in 2015. Would that be correct, Lavesh?
That's correct. Yes, absolutely. 2015 was 2015 was formation year. Early 2016 is when we did our first auction, but 2015 is when we started announcements for our consignments and everything like that. And 2016 early is when we launched and did the first auction.
Right, and you've had quite a successful run. I mean, over these past 5 odd years now, you've conducted 13 auctions. The Artery India database, which retains a log of every single sale that is conducted in the public domain, tells me that sales have been in excess of 100 crores, 105 odd crores for 411 works. So that's been quite a remarkable run, Lavesh. Congratulations on
Thank you.
Artiana so far. What is your general learning been? In terms of setting up a new brand, which is generally, when you think about the auction firmament, most of the players here are, they've been around for at least 10, maybe 15 years. So you're certainly one of the younger players who have entered the fray. And you've done this while being located overseas. So my understanding would be that your clientele would also be largely international, perhaps Indians of Indian origin, but internationally located. So if you could give us a little insight into your client profile and what the reception and what the early stage run was for Artiana, that'd be wonderful.
So, you're right. I mean, it's been quite a journey from then on. So I remember, starting off initially when no experience in client relations, engagement with any client, to sell them works or anything like that. So pretty much the initial years were like I would say not initial years. The first couple of auctions was like those startups have the family and friends around, so you would go around to them and kind of present your catalog, and obviously they were obliging. They had an interest because me being passionate about it, every time they would sit with me, the only thing I'm talking about is art. They are kind of coming to my home every time they are seeing new artworks, so the conversation revolves around them. So there was some interest that would have developed in my peer group, so that would have kind of helped me, but obviously that cannot continue, so we had to kind of grow the audience. We used the digital medium quite effectively. That's been one of our main areas of success, I would say, that reaching out to a digitally savvy audience and who've engaged with our platform. Because we are an online auction house, the question in our mind always was, should we just stick with e-catalogs or do physical catalogs? But then we found that a lot of people still wanted to have that physical catalog and kind of go through that. So we went down the route of doing the physical catalogs plus the viewings in our gallery space in Dubai. All those things added in bringing first-time collectors onto the floor to kind of bid, because they would want to engage with the art at the first instance. For them, it's all about that experiential, engagement that they would have with the art. So that helped. So that was one of the reasons why, initially we focused on doing longer auctions as well, because of the new collectors that we had, giving them time to understand how to go about the bidding process and everything like that. The client base is pretty much the Indian diaspora, and that's what we focused on, which is why I would say also that unlike so many other auction houses whose works would probably maybe soon found in the resale domain, you'll hardly find any works of ours which come into the resale domain.
Yes.
I think probably, if I can think of in the last so many auctions that you mentioned, there might be just a very, very minimal number which would have probably come about, which also would have been probably acquired by the trade, because the reason for them to buy it would be to sell it on. Nothing wrong with that, but the idea that I'm trying to put out there is that we are working very hard to work with end clients to kind of have these works placed with them. So that's what we've been working on. So that's been our core focus, to grow the audience, to work with end clients, and make them more confident about coming and buying into auction, explaining them the benefits, that why buying at an auction is probably something that is also something that would give them the assurance of price transparency. It would give them the comfort of the authenticity, having a public database of the acquisition of their work. All these things have actually helped us to grow the brand. And besides that, the other experiences that I would have had as a collector or as a buyer or a participant in an auction, I've brought them also onto our platform and try to enhance whatever was lacking. One of the things that I personally felt was important was to reduce the transaction cost. That has been a pain point for a lot of investor buyers who felt that it's you charge the seller plus you charge the buyer. There's a buyer's premium, and any person who would have thought of buying expensive works of art always has the question that why do we pay a buyer's premium? For someone who's not part of the arts fraternity, the concept is something which is not easily digested by them. So I said this was also one of the things that we need to address, and we came out with our disruptive model, which is no buyer's premium. Right. Successfully, we've been able to hold on to that, and I don't see any reason why that should change, because that's something that I believe is the cornerstone of our belief, and we will carry on with that. I think that's also been a game changer in a way, because the kind of feedback that we get from clients, especially now, like I mentioned, the new clients, to whom if you would have to explain that you need to pay a buyer's premium, is something that the concept will not kind of fly with them at all. So, I think all these things put together has helped us create this, success story for Artiana.
Sure. I just want to take a brief pause here to let anyone listening in who may not be familiar with this concept of a buyer's premium. Typically, whenever an asset is sold at auction, there is a premium which can vary in its price slab range, which is charged from the buyer for buying the asset successfully. Now, in the case of Artiana, which Lavesh founded, there is no buyer's premium, which is what you end up defining as the hammer value, which is the price that is set for the asset. That's all you pay plus any applicable taxes. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, our USP slogan, if I can call it that, is "What you bid is what you pay." So your bid price is what you actually paying, and that's your invoice value. Based out of Dubai, there are no charges for overseas buyers besides your invoice value until and unless you're buying it locally. For which there would be applicable VAT. So yes, you're correct that it would be the hammer price plus any local taxes that would be applicable, or any governmental charges that would be applicable.
Or import duties once it arrives at the port or the destination that it's meant to be secured at.
So, which would be applicable even in the case of other places of acquisition as well. So that would remain standard. Right?
Sure. So this is actually quite fascinating, Lavesh. You continue to shake things up for the ecosystem. Now, this, as you sort of pointed out, is a game changer of sorts, and it's something that has clearly identified Artiana as a go-to platform for a growing group of end buyers. Now, if you look at this particular year, 2020, which at the outset did send certain shudders down, a number of investors' backs. This has been a particularly good year for the art fraternity at large, and for Artiana as well. I was referring to the numbers from the Artery India database, particularly focused on Artiana, and Artiana has had 4 auctions over the course of this year. You've sold 177 works and raised 33 crores, just a little over 33 crores. Quite a fascinating year, wouldn't you agree?
So, actually we ourselves were very surprised initially, when we had this, the day that our auction closed, the March auction, was the day that actually the Dow sank, and, we were so concerned. We were wondering, because a lot of our buyers are either bankers or bankers' clients as well. And we were thinking, what a day for, the auction to close. But, we were okay. And, those bids came in, things closed, everything was paid for. Maybe it took like a week or 2 extra than what normally would have been the case, but everything was closed and paid. So that's how we started the year with our main auction. And during that period, like immediately after the auction, we had so many buyers, collectors calling us and asking us like, are there any deals available, any good works available on offer? And every time I would tell them that there are really no deals, because whenever anything is coming up, it's getting sold. So I would say that yes, you were right. Surprisingly, the art fraternity at large has had a purple patch, if we can call it that, and it's been very surprising. In fact, when I would say this to people, they would think I'm just trying to talk up the market, but I would actually say, so, in order to check, they would call us back again after a while and check, oh, do you know that work? Is it sold? Is it paid up? Is it like, there? I said, yes, it's gone. It's hanging on somebody's wall. And I would sometimes, send them a picture without, any other thing to give out details, showing that, listen, it's already hanging on someone's wall, So because they would think that we are just trying to kind of like, string them along. Things are in kind of like, lockdown mode, and who's really buying art. But the whole year has been brilliant for Artiana. We've done very well, but not only for us. I would say, like I mentioned, for most of the people involved in the, art sphere. So I think it's been a great year.
Absolutely. Lavesh, first of all, congratulations on a stellar year.
Thank you. Yeah, but our heart does go out to people for whom the year may not have been good. Whilst we are saying this, I mean, there are various instances that you can look at. But at least in the space that we are involved in, I can say that it's not only us; it's everyone who's done well.
Absolutely. So if you look at the auction market at large, there have been as of this morning 1,571 works that have sold, and there's been a turnover of in excess of 553 crores, which will definitely be sort of pipped further by virtue of the sales that are coming up. There are a few more auctions. As I understand, you're also trying to squeeze one more auction in over the course of.
Yes, we have that on our drawing board. We are looking at what will be the format because we wanted to do one inclusive auction, which would be like having works from across various geographies. We do that once a year, and we were not able to get those works in place because of the lockdown and everything. But we are working to try and see if we can quickly put that together.
Right. Well, here's hoping that you do manage this, Lavesh. It's always fascinating to see new format sales, and you've been very successful in terms of raising the bar on some artists who aren't necessarily pursued very actively within the auction domain. Just earlier this year, in this March sale that you referred to, you established Paresh Mehti's auction record, which stands to date. This, of course, according to Artery India's information stack, is one of the 3 records that Artiana has set. One being for Shakti, which was set at just in excess of 1 crore rupees in September 2018, and then there was another record set for Lakshma Gaud the same year in 2018, which stands at 33 odd lakhs. So is this something by design? When we look at Paresh's market. Is this something that you're very sort of actively looking at building for artists who don't necessarily have focus within the auction domain?
So, actually, this thing, whilst I would have thought that I knew about Shakti Burman's, 1 crore plus price tag that I was aware of, and I knew that that was one of his, it was the most expensive work that he sold at auction because, even he called me immediately the following day telling me that, I'm so glad that, we've had this sale and, the price has kind of crossed 1 crore and congratulations to you. And I said, no, actually, congratulations to you. And so that was an interesting call I had from him. But of Paresh and Lakshma, I had actually not realized. It's now that you mentioned to me, probably because I, look at these artists as moving targets. I mean, whilst we've achieved this today, I feel that in no time to come, it will probably be broken again and it will go. But I think that, you're right with statement that you made about including more artists, making the auction catalog more inclusive as opposed to kind of saying that we are only going to have certain artists in the catalog. I think that it stems from the fact that we speak to our clients what kind of works they are looking at. I think these are the artists that I have found that were wanted by these collectors, and when we got some good works of their whichever were not normally available, we thought it would be good to have them in the auction, and rightly so. I remember for Paresh's work, I remember very well. I mean, there were 2 people who were just going on bidding, and it didn't stop. I mean, I was wondering. I said, like, when you think of it, their works are available even in galleries, but the works that we try and put into the auction are not the ones that typically you would find. So they would be of a certain vintage or of a certain period. So in case if you really wanted that also, it's not something that you can walk into a gallery and purchase. So whilst we put in works of these artists, we make sure that they are not something what is available to you, because it doesn't make sense to have it in an auction catalog when you're going to compete with something that's being offered on the gallery floor, because then there's no reason for anyone to bid for it in auction.
Sure.
And even for Shakti's work, I remember the work that you're saying made that price. It's one of his it's the largest work that he does typically. and it was of dancing Krishna, which is a very coveted subject, which is not easy to kind of come by. And normally his works, mostly if somebody gets, they don't really sell that easily. So it doesn't come into resale market that easily, and hence that demand, the pent up demand for that size and that subject will always be there, I feel.
Yeah, so Lavesh, this is actually an extremely important point to make. In terms of the importance of the asset that is being pursued. A lot of auctions right now have what would be considered mediocre or average quality work, which typically do not quite qualify as auction worthy, but they are what sort of play out as fillers within the sale. I've noticed your catalogs in particular remain tight. They aren't overbearing, but the focus clearly remains on what you personally regard as collectible works. Would that be right?
You've made a very important point. Your observation is also absolutely correct. So, like when I told you that I used to be like, this young collector, and, I would see catalogs of, the larger auction houses based overseas, because it would only be Christie's, Sotheby's who would be holding auctions at that time, and it would be in London and, New York, you would have those sales. And, if one wanted to actually get a work into any of those catalogs, we would have a terminology, or, even in the speak, whenever we would be collecting artwork, it would be something which would be known as auction quality work. It would be like the parlance that we would use, which would be like, it's a great quality work. Today, that seems to have been blown to the wind. Anything that is not sold in the resale market or in the secondary market is what is getting pushed into auctions, is getting offered to auctioneers. So as a result, what you observed about us is I am extremely particular about the quality of the work. I don't, so much focus on the value as much as the example of that particular artist's work. So assuming that there is an artist whose work, like I told you, is available in a gallery, but if I get a very superior or a good or a rare example of that artist's work, I'm happy to include it in a catalog, because I feel that this is not something that you will get normally, and you might as well buy it now. Because in time to come, anyways, it's collectible, and it's going to become highly collectible in time to come. So I also have this partiality to works which are, I would say, having display value, if you can call it that. Because I mean, there's again an instance which I remember, there are certain golden nuggets you pick up from all these artists. So one again, artist, I remember I was having a conversation with him, senior artist, and he told me, Lavesh, always remember one thing in mind. I said, what is that? He said, so, when this is all this conversation is while we are discussing, the imagery for the serigraphs or whatever, so all this thing comes up, right? So, I was picking up a image which was a difficult image, if I can call it that, not very easy to display. So he says, Lavesh, anything that does not have display value will always have limited value. So, when you look at it from that point of view, so this was a golden nugget. So, what actually, when you look at it, so today it helps me even when I'm building my catalog. So I look at artworks which have got display value because it cuts across all sections. So that is something that we try and focus on. So ultimately, that is an important thing that has to be inherent in the artwork, and we try and focus on that. So yes, that would be one of the things that I bring on to the catalog, because if I'm curating that catalog and responsible for eventually having that a sell through of that catalog, I need to see that it should be able to be placed with collectors.
Sure. No, I completely hear you. You spoke of Shakti Barman's Dancing Krishna. Now, in the scale that you set the benchmark for, there are only under a dozen instances of the artist painting that subject in that size. And I dare say, perhaps one, maybe two of those will ever come up in resale, if at all. So whoever has managed to secure that work has had a fortunate turn. And it is something that will hold them in not only great regard from a cultural and aesthetic perspective, but also from a financial perspective. So that is something that must always be borne in mind. And I say this to anyone who's looking at entering the auction fray, bidding on works. I think your primary move has to remain that of a qualitative approach. I say this for anyone buying an artwork at any point from any forum. If quality is the measure that you go by, you will not go wrong. As long as you're not overpaying excessively without any sense of logic. That's the only other misstep that you could take. Lavesh, absolutely fascinating to know of your journey and to understand how you've navigated this domain. Um, I'd like to get a sense of your advice to someone who's looking at starting a collection. What are the 2 or 3 things that that an individual must keep in mind when they start collecting?
So, I've been asked that question many times, and, every time I come up with, the similar kind of, retorts. But I think now we are in a kind of era of social and digital revolution. We have to look at things a little more differently, and, things have become more difficult and more challenging when you want to navigate the space. Even though, certain areas have become easier because of the information that is available to you, but there are other areas which have become more complex. So initially the thing would have been, I would have told people, read up as much as you can, go through as many books, try and understand which artists you like, and what are their works that you like, and those would be the things that basically try and kind of experience, go for exhibitions, go for as many events as you can, and try and get that experiential feel of the artworks and kind of engage from there, and take some time and let your taste build up. It doesn't matter if you buy a few things and you outgrow it. It's happened to all of us, and you kind of keep enhancing and upgrading your collection, and you kind of move on, right? That would have been the pretty much straight up answer that I gave earlier. Nowadays things have become a little more kind of advanced. Things have moved on from there. So you have a lot of information available for with you just by opening your phone or your laptop or your desktop. You have everything available on the internet. So information is much more easily accessible. You have a lot of data available to you in terms of the sales that are happening across various geographies for that artist, the demand. Then even a platform like yours, which gives you so much of data just at the click of a button. So when you look at something like Artery is doing and creating that kind of information, I mean, it makes the life of so many collectors easy, because all they need to do this. But whilst in our days, what we would have to do is we would have to look at those old catalogs where you got those numbers written in, and then you would look at it, this was sold at this price in those days. So now you're presenting all that to people, so they don't need to do all that what we did, right? So that part is taken care of for them.
Yes.
What they need to now watch out for is, they need to watch out for works that they are buying, that they need to be authentic, they need to be genuine, because the values have moved up so much that now it's become even more, how would say, lucrative for people to, try and create, works which are, akin to the original, not genuine works. So, making forgeries which are very close to the original. Technology has advanced so much that there are so many media available to kind of replicate works. So, those things have become a challenge. So as a result, what they need to do, I would say, is navigate the space with someone or along with someone who is a trusted person in that space, who's got times behind them, which is spent, and kind of a track record behind them, which is proven, and also experiences of people that they have dealt with, who they can actually cross-check and verify that what has been your experiences in dealing with these people. So I would say that when you talk to a bunch of people, you realize that, okay, I've, had this person who I've been interacting with. These are the people who've been dealing with him, and, what has their experiences been. Sure. And you get the answer, as to whether or not they are dealing with the right people. So I think if you don't have that knowledge, you need to rely on someone who can help you or guide you through that process, at least for the first few transactions or few months, depending on how frequently you do that. And rely on people with a good reputation, good background, good knowledge level, somebody who's got very good domain expertise.
Sure, extremely valid point, Lavesh. I think the role of someone who comes in as either a mentor or a professional guide will remain unparalleled, especially during that early parts of the journey till you find your own feet. There is a tremendous amount of value in, I think, living and learning on your own, in making a few slips and slides, and sort of regaining your composure. because that's an integral facet of understanding and sort of instilling confidence in your taking longer and more powerful strides. But yes, I completely agree with what you just outlined. This brings me to a question that I'd like to sort of conclude our conversation with, which is a pressing one. There is this divide that seemingly exists within the market about whether to buy for the love of art or whether to buy for the love of capital and money appreciation. What are your thoughts on this? Should one engage with the market purely for financial gain, or should this remain a pursuit of the heart only?
So, while purists will say that, art has to be bought for art's sake, it should be aesthetic and everything like that. But, I think that for any ecosystem to survive, you need all components and, all people to participate and, keep the ecosystem running, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that it depends on what one's own end objective is. If one is looking at purely as a replacement to financial stocks, I think that may be a bit challenging for someone. So I think it has to be something which comes under the umbrella of passion investing. So that you have to be passionate about it. You have to understand it, love it, like it, be interested in it. And that's how you would eventually land up making money in it. Because when you've bought something correctly with the knowledge and understanding, then what would happen is that you would hold on to it and you would really not want to part with it unless somebody offers you very high amount or, something which is more than what is worth. I mean, which we all want, right? For works which are not normally available. You can also achieve that if, like we said in our earlier discussion, if you participate and, go into this acquisition with somebody who's guided you as what to buy. If you're going to approach it purely from the point of view of a financial angle, which means that you will start looking at it from a numbers point of view, which means you look at it from a point of view, okay, this artist, this work, this size, this period, this price. Every work is unique, every artwork is unique, and every collector and every buyer is unique. So, you have to be able to have that sensitivity. And I think that will come in only once you've engaged with the artworks for long. But whilst I say that, I'm sure that, even if people get into this fear with the angle of, saying that, okay, I'm going to approach it purely financially, I know that the art bug will bite them, and eventually they will become, collectors or, hybrid collectors / investors over a period of time. So I think that's definitely bound to happen. It's hardly someone you can meet who says, I have a completely, unemotional or a disconnected approach with art after they've engaged with it for some time at least. Initially, maybe they might have that approach, but later on you'll find them all turning. So I've had this experience because I can tell you from personal, interactions with people who would have said, oh, I'm buying it. I'm just buying it purely for this. And, I said, okay, but what you do is at least put it up in your home for some time. And then, anyways, it's your asset. Why don't you live with it for some time? And later on, if I would have gone back to them with higher offers, they are not inclined to sell. They're saying, no, now it's looking good on the wall. Let's look at something else, because they've got used to it.
Correct.
So that's it. So when you start living with good art, it's something that you get used to it. So you've not had that exposure, which is why you think of it purely from a financial perspective. But when you start living with good art, fine art, automatically, it kind of like seeps into your day-to-day, existence, and it becomes part of your entire, environment. So I think people come into this fear with any angle, but eventually I'm sure that once you live with good art, fine art, it will eventually kind of, grow on you.
Absolutely. No one can be so cold-hearted as to not find their heart, warming up to the touch of art. That is something that happens. It's inescapable. I've seen the most hard-nosed investors, people who have, as you rightly said, they've just not had the exposure to the arts, even a cultural, side to the equation has been entirely absent in their upbringing. But having understood the potential financial benefits of it, have come into it, and are now, I dare say, complete converts, where there are some works that even if you offer them, significant premiums of what currently are the benchmarks, they would refuse to part with those works. So I hear you, Lavesh. I'm completely aligned to what you summarized. So if I take stock of where your personal journey is right now, as I understand, Artiana has just opened a space in Bombay. So congratulations. I think your next adventure is clearly on the horizon, and this should be quite exciting. Once this pandemic and its throes are lifted a little, then we hope to see you in India. And
Absolutely.
here's wishing you all the very best for everything that you touch.
Thank you. And I wish you and Artery the same. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Lavesh. Thank you for your time. This was very insightful. Thanks once again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.